table, on this table. You're installing, you're installing this tab with RSP at this location, right? It's gonna be this part.
So you guys need to tell me a little bit about where you are in terms of what you did last week. So today's plan basically is to start off with some of the more advanced scripting concepts. Last week you should have done some basics of variable declaration, if conditions, of how to get objects to move. Today we are going to start with how you take those concepts and change objects or change the camera position according to your requirements in play mode. Then we'll also look at how you can bring rigid bodies and colliders onto objects and what they basically do. Did you cover any of those concepts last week?
Yeah. So for me, for Wednesday, for the Wednesday class, I attended a later afternoon one. So I got to the point where I was able to use the WASD keys in order to move a capsule in different directions. Like I can actually, do you want me to share my screen and show you, or just describe?
So you attended this class, right? So
on Monday. On Wednesday, I was on a Wednesday afternoon class. So in that class, we went through some scripting and just did like for loops, did some if statements, did the input get key command in order to see if a key's been pressed, and then I was able to move an object, which was a capsule. I could just use the forward, back, and left and right keys to move the module around, and then had the camera childed, or the capsule was the parent of the camera, and so as you move around, the camera moved.
Okay. Yasemin, where are you at?
Okay, hi. So I'm caught up to the morning class, which in it we learned, we didn't learn how to make the camera parent of the object, but we learned about like transform, translate, like vector, like input key, like that we can do that. My husband is a programmer, so he taught me a little more than what we learned, but basically all we learned was like, public integer, like just general concepts and debug and how to have it, what are the basic stuff. So it was, and I have like, I can move, I made an object that I can move on the screen. I can just share my screen with you right now. Okay, can you let me know one more time, where is the button for share screen?
So at the end of your Google Meet, you would have at the bottom, present now option. So bottom right.
Bottom right. Oh, it says you are presenting. It says Roy is presenting.
Okay, try now. Present now.
Okay, got it. Now I can. So now, anti-screen. Okay. So is it showing?
Yep.
So, 1 second. So I just made just this thing that it can move backward and forward and all this, the world and stuff. So that's basically all we learned in the morning class. We didn't cover much.
Okay. Do these objects have any colliders, any rigid bodies on it?
Yes. Yeah, they have a rigid body on it. So the script for this one is, wait, oops. Yes, they do have There they are.
Okay.
They have sphere collider but we didn't actually about the collider. We didn't learn much. We learned about like freezing positions and stuff.
Okay. So
And rigid body. Yeah, rigid body.
I think so. You guys are almost in the same place. I'm just gonna take the first, say, 15 minutes to go over all of these concepts a little more in depth, and then we can start from there. Okay, so don't worry about what I have in my project. Yours will be different. So right now, if I press play, you see that this arrow that was floating, that fell to the ground.
No, you're not sharing your screen.
Oh, sorry.
Yep, I see it now.
So when I press play, this arrow falls on the ground. That is because of the rigid body. If I press you will see it has two components, the box collider and the rigid body. If I press play, it falls and hits the ground. That's because it has a collider on it. If I turn the collider off, it will fall right through the surface. If it doesn't have the rigid body and it doesn't have the gravity on, it stays where it is. You can see it did not fall down. One more thing we can do is say, if I rotated this in a certain way and I wanted when it fell down for the position of this arrow to stay where it is now and it not just fall realistically, I can also here freeze some position, say X and Z, and rotation X and Z, and then when it falls, for this, gravity needs to be checked. So when it falls, it will fall in that kind of an angle. It will not fall realistically face down. So depending on your different needs, you will need to do this. Also, right now, these objects have colliders and rigid body on them. So if I, in playtime, move these objects, they act realistically in terms of gravity. Also, because they have colliders on them, they interact with each other. If I'm trying to press these objects down into the boxes, they react with each other. So that is because of these box colliders. Say if I turn the box collider off on this cube, it falls right through the surface. So physics is still acting on the object, but it is not acting on the physics of the world. So it doesn't, it is like having a spirit or something in the environment where it doesn't have a physical presence. So the physics wouldn't know what this object's dimensions and where these objects are located, so it cannot really control its behavior, but it still acts on everything the same way. So depending on the different requirements you have in game time, we can manipulate these properties. So next, when I play, I can also move my camera. If you can see here, I'm moving my camera using keyboards and in different directions. So I'm gonna go over these scripting concepts, and then hopefully you people are familiar with some of these concepts. If not, it can clear up. Okay, so for this, I am gonna create a C# script, and I'm gonna call this different shoot. You can call it whatever you want. Basically, we're gonna add this to our player. Anyone has any doubts so far? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So I'm starting up a script. If you already have a script open, you can start that up, or you can also create a new script. I will go over some other additional concepts that if you just want to have a new script and play around with these concepts in that one and not mess up what you have already made, that would also work. So here I'm gonna tell you what these functions each do, and what the different kinds of variables are. So this is a different shoot script. I am attaching this to my main camera, and when I select main camera in the inspector window, I see this different shoot script. Now I'm gonna declare two variables here, public bool can see
Are you recording? Are you logged in?
and public float time update. Now at the start of function is what gets executed at the beginning of your game time. So if I press play, this function is going to get executed once, and in the play mode this void update gets executed at every frame. So depending on the functionalities you have in your game, this update loop time will vary. If you have lots of artifacts and lots of functionalities, this can be like 30 frames per second to say 100 frames per second, and for VR you should have at least 60 frames per second. That's a standard. We will go over those later as well. So now at the void start, I'm gonna set the scan C to be true, and this is gonna happen only once. And for every update, I'm gonna say time update is equals to time update plus time dot delta time. Now time is a function Unity or is a class Unity already knows. It has many different properties. So when I press time and I press dot, Visual Studio gives me all these options. So like here, when I created a script here, this class different diff shoot was created, and this took functionalities or inherited functionalities from mono behavior. So in this script, my class is the diff shoot class and the parent class is the mono behavior. We do a similar thing when we parent different objects to different objects in our Unity hierarchy. If I say here, you can see this arrow is now a child of this main camera. If I take this out and I'm dragging and dropping it on top of the main camera, I am actually childing this arrow to the main camera. That is the operation we are performing. In terms of script, what is actually happening in the background is this diff shoot is a type of a class, same as say main camera or same as the arrow, and this mono behavior is another class which is like the camera, and when I perform this drag and drop operation, I make this camera a parent of this arrow. So it is the basic concept under which Unity works, and we can manipulate that in different ways. If it's not very clear to you, don't worry about it. It will become clear as you work on these things more and more every week. Now time update is a float value, and when you hover over this, you see that this function also returns a float value, so you can add this and update this at every frame. Now I'm saving this, and if I go back to my Unity, sometimes you have to press Ctrl S here as well, and that saves and reflects those changes here. So now you can see that this shoot has these two variables, CanC and time update. You are seeing these variables here because I declared them to be public. Now if I made this variable not public, by default it becomes a local variable, and I save this and come back here and press Ctrl S, and you will see that variable is gone. You cannot see it here anymore. So if you ever declare a variable like that and you wonder where did it go, why can I not see it in the inspector, it's probably because of that. For you to be able to see a variable in Unity, the script has to expose those variables as public. I can also have local variables for my use. So then for my use becomes only for my use in that script. How are we doing so far? Doesn't everyone understand these concepts? Any questions?
Yeah, no questions here.
Yasaman?
Yeah, no question. I'm just listening basically to what you're saying. I'm watching it. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So now if I've saved this and both of these are public, and I'm going to Unity and I'm pressing play, you will see at every frame this time update is changing. You can see here at the bottom right that every frame this time update value changes, and this CanC was checked to be true only once. That was at the start. Nothing happens after. Now we can have an if condition that says if CanC, which is the same thing as saying that CanC is equals true. Saying if CanC and CanC equals true is the same thing. Basically any if condition here will check if it is a true or a false. You can write a complicated sequence of things, say 2 plus 3 is equals 5. This will always return true. You can also say and 2 divided by 3 is greater than 10, which is going to be false. So if this is false and this is true and this is an AND operation, then you are not, this is in total will be false. So if I say do something here, this operation will never get executed because this is an AND operation. If instead I said or, that is if this is true or this is true, And we know that this is already true always and this is always false, but because this is an OR, this will get executed. So these are the different conditions that you can use in game time. Now I'm gonna start working with some of the input features of taking keyboard inputs. If you have this in your script, or you may want to redo this, I'm gonna do maybe some of the commands a little differently, so you can start a new script and start typing with me, so that it's more practice for you. So we are gonna now take 4 keyboard inputs to turn and rotate the camera during game time, and then we are gonna see how we can use different conditions to add forces and to move these objects. So for this, I'm gonna put a condition: if input dot get key code dot up arrow. So what this is doing is, input is a class which handles all the kinds of inputs Unity can take from your keyboard and later from your VR headsets. Now in this input class, getKey is a kind of functionality which scans for all the keys that's there on your keyboard. Key code is how these different keys are mapped in the program. So when you say key code equals to up arrow, there is a code for this up arrow, and this code is known by this function. It's all there internally built into Unity. So when you say this and you actually press the up arrow, this condition will become true during your game time. So now I'm gonna check that if I am pressing this up arrow, what do I want to do? I want to move my object to which this script is attached, say in the forward direction. For this, you can do many things. You can say GameObject dot transform let's first do this dot transform dot translate, and I'm gonna say transform, or this dot transform dot forward, and then I'm going to multiply that with the speed and the time spent between frames. That's the delta time. Now speed I have not declared, so I'm gonna declare speed to be a public float variable called speed up here. Now I'm not sure if you're understood the concept of what these up arrow, forward, and these mean. So in Unity, when you click on any object, it has these arrows, right? This is your Z axis, this is your X axis, and this is your Y axis. So in terms of script, your forward is this, it is movement in X. So with transform, you see in your inspector, you have this transform and you have X, Y, and Z. When you say transform dot forward, the script understands the direction along X. When you say this dot transform dot right, it understands the direction along Z. And when you say this transform dot up, it understands the direction along Y. This here is the object the script is attached to. instead of saying this, I can also say just transform. And Unity understands this as well. However, using this is a good practice because later on you might do these transformations on other objects as well. So in that case, this makes it clear that where this operation is going to get performed. When you say this, and I have attached this script to my main camera, in this script, this is referencing this main camera to which this script is attached. So this transform is now the transform on the main camera. So it's this transform. So it's the up, right, and forward. So when I say if input get key code up arrow, and I am putting the transform translate in the forward direction, then every frame I can control how my camera is going to move. It can move in, now it can move in the X direction. Now say I want to move it, now it is always going forward. I can only move the camera in front of itself. Now I can say if input dot get key code dot down arrow and I'm gonna say I want, when I press the down arrow, I want it to go backwards. But backwards is not an option. I cannot find backwards. So what we do here is basically minus of transform dot forward, and that the same thing is going to apply for right and up. Now I want to go say up or down, so I'm gonna say if input dot get key, and if everyone understands these concepts, feel free to type along with me. I'm gonna say right arrow, and right arrow is going to go up, physically up from that plane along Y direction. So this dot transform dot translate this dot transform dot up into speed into time dot delta time. And now for left arrow, so I get the left arrow option, and it's going to be this dot transform dot translate this dot transform dot up, but it's going to be the negative of this up, and into speed into time dot delta time. So now when I save this and go back to my Unity and I press Control S to save it, and pressing play. Nothing was happening because I have not set speed to be anything here. It's 0. So I cannot really move with speed 0. It's the same thing as not moving at all. I'm pressing the keys, but nothing happens. So now I need to make speed to be, say, 20, and then I press play, and now I can move my camera. Any questions so far?
Can you bring the script up again? Thank you. Thank you.
So what we did here was we used the input defined class, we used the functionality of getKey, and we checked if the key code is up arrow, and then we performed a function. One more thing about this code is that it's kind of inefficient. Every time, every update to perform these 4 operations, it is checking if this. But at any time, you can only press one key down. So there is no point in checking if this. You can say else if here, and what this will do is it will now check first this one. If this was false, it will readily go to this one. If this is false, it will go to this one. If this is false, to this one. But if this was true, it will never check this. If this was true, it will never check this. So that way, because you can only press one key down at a time, this code is faster. Now I want everyone to have this functionality in, and then share your screens and show me your camera moving according to keyboard inputs.
I can show it. So here's the scripts. So I got the up arrow, down, right, and left. And then here's my capsule. So actually I have it so the capsule itself goes back and forth, and then now the up, or the forward and the back keys, and then the down and the up. So it looks like it's working on my end.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. Great.
Okay.
Mark, does your
Yep.
capsule rotate?
No, it just goes through 4 axes.
Okay.
2 axes.
So how about you try to rotate it while everybody
Okay.
else is catching up, and then we will go
Okay.
how you can rotate it. I will go over it.
So do I wrote the script. Do I assign it to the camera?
Yes. So when you have the script here, just drag and drop to your camera like that.
Okay. Okay, I have a question.
Yeah.
So I dropped it on the camera. Then what?
Then press Ctrl S, and when you select the camera, so when you select the camera like this, in the inspector you should see that script,
Okay.
and you should be able to see that speed variable that you have declared.
I'll see. Can I share my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so I brought it on, but in the right it just shows these two. It shows like class 3, class, like this is the name that I put for it, but it doesn't show me the component of it, like I wrote it.
Can you bring the script up? Double click on it.
Yes. Okay.
Can you go up?
Yes. More?
Yeah. So you should be able to see, because all of these are public, and you are the class is public. So you, however, have two scripts when you go back to your Unity.
Yes.
When you select the camera, scroll down on the inspector.
Yep.
You have two class 3 scripts. So remove component. Click that and remove component.
Okay.
And then press Ctrl S.
You mean, is it for a Mac or?
So you have to just save it.
Okay. Got it. Then it doesn't show up still.
Okay, remove this component as well, this class 3 component. And you're sure that the code, you're opening the same class file as it's in this script location.
Yes, so this is a class.
Yeah, okay.
This is this.
Now you can.
So now I drag it to the camera, right?
Or you can also select the camera.
And then drag this.
And drag this onto the inspector.
Okay, so like here?
Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe at that empty space, not on top of the, right next to the component.
Oh, okay. It doesn't.
Okay, so it doesn't work. You can.
Okay, it did it. It did it.
Okay.
But it still doesn't show the script.
Can you expand near this settings? Can you click there? This small circle. Double click there in your inspector.
This?
In your inspector, next to
Yeah.
where it says script class 3, that text box, there is a small circle.
Yes, I'm clicking on it, but it doesn't open.
Okay. Maybe start a new script and name it something different, not class 3. it might
Okay.
be an issue because class is a keyword. So
Mm.
maybe not use have some generic name,
Okay.
and then you can just copy paste that code from that script and add there.
Okay. So I can stop sharing my screen and I try and I'll let you know what happens. Thank you.
No, you can.
I can do it now?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, but here this class name has to be camera movement.
Okay.
Have you saved the
Okay.
script?
Yes.
Now remove all the components, script component from the camera, and then add this one.
Okay.
Okay, maybe just drag it on the camera in the hierarchy.
Same error.
Can you go to your console?
To the here? Okay,
So
there you go.
right next to your console. Can you clear that?
Yes.
There's a small clear button. So says only assignment call, decrement call, new object expression. Can you open your camera movement script?
Yes.
Yeah, timeout. It should be an equal sign. There's a minus on line 21. Time
Line
update
20.
should be equal to time update.
So just below void update.
On 29 here?
Line 21.
Oh, 21.
Update.
Okay.
It should be
Equal.
time update equals, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
That should fix it.
And then okay, so I assign it again.
Can you go to your console and
did you save it?
Yes. I think. Yes, saved. Is there anything else? I guess this.
So go to your console.
Uh-huh.
So can you delete that class 3 script?
Yes.
Now try it.
Okay, it's there. And then I change the speed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
Press play.
okay.
Now if you press play, can you move it using those arrows?
But the camera is like that,
Yeah, you're moving it using the up arrow.
and down and left and right.
Yeah, okay. Carolyn,
Yes.
how are you doing?
How about this?
Okay, let's see.
That movie, oh, it's hilarious.
Okay, so
Naked Gun, that's it.
right now I just have the basic. I ended up switching the up to right because the up was actually going up in the Y direction. And I don't want it to bounce up and down, so I changed it to right and the negative so that I had all 4 directions. And so I have it attached to the character so that it
Okay. Great. Now I will present it again. This time I'm going to show you how you can rotate. So just like how we did translate here. So what translate does is it takes the current position and adds a new position. This new position is taken from this direction, multiplying the speed and taking the frame time. So it's basically saying your change in distance is your velocity times the time that you have traveled with that velocity. So this translate function in the background is just adding your current position to your future position. Now for rotation, every object has a rotation. So this is by default the rotation to which we have set these objects when we designed it in the inspector. We can also control these rotations using script. So for this I am going to use the page up and page down keys. You can use any other key that you want. So key code dot page down, and I'm gonna say this dot transform dot rotate, this dot transform dot up into rotate speed into time dot delta time. Now this transform dot up and this rotation means that it's going to rotate about this up direction. So here, if this up is this y and I'm saying rotate about this y, then it's actually going to rotate like this. Similarly, if I said this rotate to be, say, right, then it was going to rotate about this direction. About this direction. So it is the rotations axis that we specify here. Now I have not declared a rotate speed, so I'm gonna say public float rotate speed up top. And now you can rotate your objects in any axis you want, depending, whether it's a drone or it's an actual person, what's the real functionality of this movement. I can see I'm rotating, I'm not translating. So you can similarly use different keys. Say, now going to copy paste this part and say instead of page down, use page up, and I'm going to say instead of rotating about up direction, I want it to rotate about right. So now you have page up, page down, and the 4 arrow keys to control your player or your camera and navigate in the scene. I'm gonna have the script open so that you can type this up, and then we're gonna move on to a new concept. If you have any questions, any doubts, ask me. Is everyone good? Can I move on?
I'm good, yep.
Yes, man?
Yes, I'm writing the script. I'm almost done. Thank you.
Okay.
I have one question. If while I'm writing a script, like my rotate speed gets red in the word rotate speed gets red, what does that mean?
So rotate speed, if I have not declared rotate speed, then it will become
Oh.
red. So up top,
Okay.
you have to declare it.
Okay, public for, okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm moving on to a new concept. for this, I will create a new script, and I'm gonna call that populate. We are going to use this script to automatically generate game objects during runtime. These game objects can be many things. It can be these target boxes, say as and when I am killing these boxes, I want more boxes to automatically come up. How we can do that? Or say I want to shoot arrows from my camera. Once I shoot one arrow, one more arrow should automatically come in its place. So how we can generate these objects by itself and control where its position is going to be, how the rotation is going to be, and how it's going to move, and add forces to them. So this is going to be the next big concept. For this, I will tell you some basic things. You can just listen and ask me questions if you have any doubts, and then we will try to get some functionality in that you will start coding in. So for this populate script, I'm gonna declare a public game object and call this target boxes or target box. So just how we declared a bool variable or a float variable, I can also declare a game object variable. Game object, how we create game objects in Unity by clicking on the scene and going to game object and say 3D object and saying cube, sphere, and capsule. Similarly, all those objects are essentially a game object class that we can bring into our code, just like we did with the input class, with the key code class. Unity allows us to do all these things. Now say I want to, at the start of the game, I want to have this game object be created right in front of my camera. I will, for this, say this is going to be a private, or you can just say local. By default, you don't have to specify local. You just type game object temp target box, temp target. Now at the start, I say target instantiate target box, and I say target box dot transform dot position dot x is equals to, and I want it to be just in front of my camera. So for this, I can say here public game object camera reference, and I'm gonna say take this camera reference dot transform dot position dot x, and I'm gonna add say 5 units and say I want this position to be just in 5 units difference in front of the camera. A simpler way of doing this is to also say transform dot position equals to camera dot transform dot position. Sorry, camera. Now, right now, this position and this position is the same. Now if I hover over it, this position, you can see it says vector 3 transform. So now I can add a vector 3 to this. For this I can say this is going to be another private vector 3. I'm gonna say vector 3 add position, and I'm gonna say this 5.0f 0. Sure, I've done lots of mistakes. Now how you do this in C# is you say this is making a new variable of a type. If I say vector 3 is an internal class. I say make an object or a variable of this type, and I say new vector 3, and I give the value of this vector 3. So once I have this declared, and this is for now fixed, I can add this as add position. You can also, so this is for the first time. At the start, this is going to happen. So let's see, this is my camera. I am going to add this populate script to an empty game object. Here, there is no reference to this, right? This operation is not being performed on an object. It is just in the whole world that it's declaring two types of target boxes, and it's performing this operation. It is not associated to any specific object for now. So for that, what we can do is say create empty, and I'm just gonna call this functionality, and I'm gonna add this populate script to this functionality. And once I click this, this is just a script, and I see here target box and camera reference. Now these are variables that we declared to be public here, and just how we did with speed and rotate speed, we have to in the beginning say and assign a value to it. Otherwise, speed and rotate speed by default are 0, and target box and camera reference are default non-game objects. So now what I want to do is I want to populate with these kinds of target boxes. So I am going to bring one of these target cubes, say this one, and now this, you will see in the inspector, this has changed and I cannot drag and drop anymore. So how you can do this is here in your inspector you have this tiny little lock. If you press on that, it locks, and now even if I click on some other game object, this stays fixed. So now I'm going to say I'm selecting this cube and I'm dragging it onto this target box. So now this target box is going to be replicated at the start of the game. Now what is this camera reference? This camera reference is our main camera. So for this, I'm just gonna take my main camera and drag it here. So now my script will take my camera's reference and a sample target box, and it's going to instantiate a new box, and it's going to place the position of that box a certain distance away from my camera's position. Control save here, or however you save it, and then I press play. Now, is there a game object? This is where you need to have this camera movement when you're doing these functionalities. You don't actually know what is going wrong, and it's very difficult to debug if you do not have this. Now you see this object got populated. It's here. You can see it right there. But the problem is that my camera is actually, for the forward of my camera, this is the forward, is actually pointing away from where the camera is looking at. So I need to say this to be -5. I'm gonna repeat this, don't worry. So if I do this and I press play, now you see this box came in right in front of the camera. So I repeat this concept. This is my camera right here. My camera also has this arrow as its child, and so as a whole, this set, this is these arrows. Now you can see that this forward arrow is pointing away from where the camera is looking at. This camera is looking at, it's supposed to look at here, but its direction is opposite. So let's, here I'm going to go towards my camera. I'm pressing F, I'm rotating it here, and if I select it, this is the direction in which the forward works. So to get it near these boxes, I am setting this position to be -F. Now what you can also do is, actually right now, if you can see in game time, my camera is looking at this direction, at this direction. We don't want that. We for now want it to look at our target boxes. I'm pressing E and I'm turning this way to look at these boxes, and I'm pressing W on my keyboard and I'm selecting it, and now you see that my forward arrow is now towards the boxes. Now if I press play, the box comes right in front of the camera like we want it. Now this box is a replica of this cube. This cube is what we dragged. Now I'm unlocking the inspector. So now this cube by default or by design has this box collider and this rigid body. So when I'm instantiating a replica of this cube in my scene, it by default has these colliders and this rigid body, so gravity and all these forces directly start acting on it and it starts rolling down the hill. Do we understand these concepts? Any doubts? Yes, Aman?
Yeah. Like, was there like a file or something where it had all these boxes beforehand, or are we just following along?
So you can do this with any object you have created. These are just my objects. I just went and created a game object, and I said cube, and I went to my assets in my materials folder. I have this target, and I press this on this cube,
Oh, okay.
and that is how I created these. Then I created an empty game object that I called target cubes, and then I parented this target with these cubes. So you can do this with any game object you have. If you have any assets, or maybe even any player related objects, maybe you want to have multiplayer players and you want to replicate your player, you can do that. You can say if you have that player as a sequence, you can take when you're dragging it onto this functionality here, target box. Instead of saying target box to be this cube, you can drag that player prefab into here. You can do this with other models or anything. I'm gonna do this one more time, and maybe this time with this arrow right here, and you can follow along. And if you don't want to do it with your player, maybe just get some box or some kind of model. I don't know if I've shown you this, or if you have Paint 3D, you can go to your Paint 3D, and you can, in this Remix 3D, you can download many different kinds of 3D models. You don't even have to build them. So it comes with all these models, and that you can use in your game. And once you have these models, I can show you later how you can export them and get it into your game. You can also go to your asset store and search for models, and just get in a model like that, and we will try to replicate that model. Instead, we can also make our own prefab model. For this, let's say I am going to make a sphere, and I am going to make another sphere just on top of it, say sphere again, and I'm pressing W, and I'm bringing this sphere out, and I'm pressing R, and I'm scaling this, and now this is in itself a game object. And then I can go to materials and say I will add a glass surface, and now this becomes a prefab, and I can make a prefab folder and just drag this into here, and now I can replicate this prefab many times in my scene. So I'm now deleting this, but this prefab that I made and dragged onto my prefab folder stays there. Now I go to this functionality, and instead of the cube, now I'm going to say replicate this prefab that I just made. And now if I press play, this prefab is populated. But the cube, by default, this cube had these rigid body, these collider options on it. My prefab does not. By design, I did not bring the rigid body on it. I can add the rigid body component. I can say rigid body, and now this prefab itself has the rigid body, and in the functionality I drag and drop this again, and now if I play it, it is populated, and then gravity also starts acting on it and it starts to roll. So some objects you would want gravity to act on it, like these game objects, but maybe your player not so much. It depends on the kind of functionality you want. So for now, I don't want the rigid body, so I'm gonna remove component. Is there any doubt?
So for the population for the game object, mine is acting kind of behaving very strangely.
Okay.
Here, let me share.
Yasmin, did you miss some part of this?
This is Caroline, sorry.
Yeah, no, Yasmin had dropped out of the call.
Oh no.
No, it's okay. You can go on. I can.
Okay, so I ended up making a cube, so at least like when it like if I collide with it, like, you know, you have the rigid body and stuff like that, so it kind of reacts to the player putting it here. And so so right now I have the populate script on here, but when I press play, this is what happens.
Yep, that's actually awesome. In your script, can you open your script?
Yeah.
So you have that populate functionality. Is it? You have it in your start. I thought it was in your update. That's why it's creating many instances.
Oh, was this supposed to be in the update function?
No. This is correct. Now,
okay.
Where is this attached to? Where is this script attached to?
Attached to a cube.
Okay, so you see this cube is rendered at every frame. At every frame, because this functionality is added on top of the cube, what you're doing is you're performing this action every frame.
Oh.
You don't want that. That is why for me, it is an empty game object, create empty, and then I call this just a functionality. So,
I think I might have missed that.
Yeah, so
part.
If it's an empty game object and then you add this functionality script just on that empty game, it is not getting rendered at every frame, so this functionality is not performed at every frame.
Okay. Well, let me change that, which is populate.
Yeah, someone?
Yes, I was kicked out for like 10 minutes and I couldn't come back in, so I'm behind. I have to watch the recording.
Okay. Did you at all follow the instantiate concept?
I followed all your, like whatever you taught. I heard everything and then I got kicked out.
Okay. I'm gonna repeat that, so don't worry.
But don't worry, I can also view the recording. I don't want you to slow the class because of me.
So you should be able to, next I will instantiate a different object. I will instantiate this arrow and say add forces to this arrow, so then you can just follow along with that part.
Okay. Can you bring your script up one more time so I take a screenshot because I got disconnected, sorry.
Okay. So what I did was I made an empty game object. I made a create empty. Right. Here I made a create empty and I called this functionality. Something like that. And then to this functionality empty game object, I added a script that was this populate script. That's the script. What this script is doing is it's declaring a public GameObject target box, and it's taking the reference of a public GameObject camera reference, and it's taking two local variables, which is a temp target, and it's taking a vector3, which is a position that you're going to add to this camera references position. Then you are going to instantiate a replica of this target box as a temp target, and you are going to add this position to this camera reference position. That is what is happening here. And then you add this script to this functionality. You select this functionality here in target box. You drag your replica. I made a prefab which looks like this, and I dragged this onto my target box, and my camera reference, I took this main camera and dragged that one onto here, and then when I press play, it creates a replica of this prefab. This prefab does not have a rigid body, it just has a collider, so that's why it is not falling to the ground. I'll have this open. Okay. So if you do not have, the problem Caroline had was that she added this script to a cube and not an empty game object. What that made it do is that the cube is getting rendered at every frame. So when you have that script attached to that cube, this functionality of the start in this script, this start functionality, because this is attached to a cube which is getting generated at every frame, gets executed at every frame. This is no longer an action that happens only once, because this entire script gets destroyed and again recreated every time the cube is getting populated in your scene. So this action gets executed multiple times. Okay. So next we will do a similar thing. Now there are many ways of doing this. When Usman and maybe even Yasser will take your future classes, they might do this a little differently, but the concepts are the same. You may add these scripts at different, two different objects. You can just have these empty functionality scripts like I am doing. But the basic principle remains the same, that you take a game object that you replicate, you make a replica of that object, and then you take a reference position where this object should be generated, and then you do this either at the start, or depending on your functionality, you do this based on some condition. So now I am going to make this arrow appear every time something happens. So I'm going to change, or let's comment this part out. This is how you comment a chunk of code, and this is how you comment out single lines of code. So this is to not remove these functionalities, but try out different functionalities using the same script. Now here I'm going to say public game object arrow, or let's say an arrow, and then I'm gonna say public temp arrow, sorry, a game object. This is not public, this is, and something might happen differently. We need to go over that concept as well. So game object temp arrow, and I'm gonna say a public game object reference point. Instead of this reference point, you can also take something like a transform. So a transform reference point, and say a position that you add, that is a vector 3 add position new vector 3, and I'm gonna say 2.0f 0.0f 0.0f. There, depending on what this reference point is and what this add position is, we might change the position of this replicated object in the scene. Now I'm gonna say, if I press a certain key, say if input dot get key code dot or let's say get mouse button, and mouse button, you can give it an int button. I say 1. By default, this mouse 1 is your right click. You can also do key code dot mouse 0, the left mouse button, and if you do that, then you do a input dot get key. So to keep things standard, we're gonna say key code mouse 0, and when I do this, I want to replicate this arrow that's there in my scene, but I want the new arrow to be in the position that this arrow is at. So I take this functionality, I take, now if you're clicking on other objects, this is going away and you cannot drag and drop. So for that, I'm making this locked by pressing this lock button here, and then I click on this arrow and drag it on this arrow. Now I take the reference point, so this reference point will also be the reference point of this current arrow, and I am going to say temp arrow is instantiate arrow, and I'm going to make this temp arrows dot transform dot position to be equal to this reference point. So this is a transform, so this reference point dot position. Now, right now I am not adding. This add position is just going to be in the same place this arrow is at right now. So save this and play. Now you see it's very difficult because they are totally associated with each other in every way. Now let's make a prefab of this arrow. I'm dragging it into here. When I select this prefab, I am going to remove this component. I'm going to go into the functionality. Oops. So I'm going to remove the rigid body component from this prefab, and I am going to this functionality. I'm going to add my populate script to my functionality. In here I am going to drag this arrow as the prefab, which does not have a rigid body, and I'm going to take the reference point of this object which has the rigid body. And now if I press play, then I move the rigid body from here. Okay, looks like we're out of time and everyone has dropped out of the call.
Oh no.
Yeah, so yeah, I will share this video and you can play around with these concepts, and we will pick up from here and we'll see how we can add forces to these game objects to then shoot these boxes with these arrows and then have something be done to the boxes.
Okay, I'll just have to. I think the Steam has like pre-made assets and stuff where they have the bow and arrow and the arrows and stuff itself. I just probably have to go back and add those. I think the first time around we were just because I'm part of the I guess technically what they call the morning classes, afternoon for me because I'm on like Eastern time, but I think the first thing you do is set up the train and everything, and then the second class that we had, it was like basic movements like on a capsule, and then he gave us a challenge to make a house out of like out of the objects that come with Unity, whether it be a sphere or here. That's why there's my person's in like a sort of house. So, but I don't know. That's just a matter of shifting around like just objects and scripts and.
Yep.
So that it matches the situation here.
Yeah, so these are just things that you can play around with based on whatever scene you have. maybe you want to replicate or instantiate some kind of an object that will perform some action. Maybe some change the color of a wall if you instantiate something, right? So you can play around with those functionalities. Right now in the script you have this transform position. You can even bring in something like a public material and say change the material to a prefabbed material, and you can play around with those. Instead of having a transform position, say you can create a new prefab material and add that onto a object in the script. We'll go over those concepts next week as well.
Okay, actually, you know what? For two of the pieces, I actually have compiler errors.
And the rules change after your
Do you want to share your screen?
Yeah.
You can do it all.
Let's see.
This piece was broken up the whole class, and it's like
No. Share.
like literally, how hard can that be?
So I have this sim code, but I don't know, but your version of it doesn't have errors, but mine does. I'm not entirely sure.
Can you go on top?
You would think that teenage boys would want the freedom, though. Like, maybe if it's
Like, did I accidentally comment something out that I wasn't supposed to?
No, this looks okay.
I mean, that's like everyone I know, they
At
still
least
want that
when you're
thing.
declaring
Parties and like you know,
this
and you have to actually
directory
get there. Like
this looks correct.
everyone I know in Virginia still does
When you
that.
hover over it, what does the message?
Well, no,
show?
like Bobby's siblings. Yeah, like they still like you know. I don't know. They are always driving places.
Oh, so this is a minus sign? It should be an equals to.
Oh, I think because it was really small on your screen
Yeah,
that it looked like a minor. Okay, so there we go.
yeah. So, minus
So much
we
to
will
look
only
for.
use when we are actually performing, a mathematical operation. These things are, you're taking the temp arrows transform position and you're setting this equal to a reference position.
Okay, that makes more sense. I was like minus. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then
The school bus go there.
okay, I guess it just looks it just looks really small, like a minus arrow on your screen. Okay, looks like we're all good there.
Okay.
All right, well, I'll let you go. But thanks as always for the lesson.
Yep, no problem. I'll see you next Wednesday.
All right, bye.
Yeah.